Hi, welcome everyone to the Quantum Mystic podcast with myself, Jane, and my wonderful partner, Lisa. And today we're diving into a topic that feels really deeply relevant, especially in times of chaos and unrest, which I think we're all feeling. And it's about maintaining equanimity when everything around us really feels uncertain or filled with fear. I think really, truly everyone is looking for ways to stay steady and to keep a sense of calm when things are falling apart. And it's not easy. There's a real power in learning how to hold that inner balance. So Lisa, what do you think? What is equanimity to you?
To me, it came about when I was studying the Kabbalah with my spiritual teacher Bob Lancer, and I he talked a lot about disconnecting your sense of happiness from the nature of what's going on in the world around you, and that it's the nature of the world to go. It's like a bicycle wheel. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. Things are great, and like the process of change and growth and evolution means that it's always changing, always in flux. Sometimes our ego identification is with, oh, that's good, and this thing is bad, you know, and then to sort of not take those changes personally. So first of all, it's not whether the wheel is up or down. It's not about me as a person, and then disconnecting my sense of happiness and okayness from whatever is happening, whatever we are on the wheel. And right now, we're just in this deconstruction phase. We're in this larger global deconstruction phase, which is really uncomfortable for the ego self. And
Mhm.
I think, um, like going to more of an internal, self-referencing place, where I'm okay because I say I'm okay. The world is okay because I'm okay, and that ultimately I always come back to the same truth, which is the only thing I can control is my own state of consciousness. That's
Yeah.
it. That's the only thing I have any control over. And if I keep my state of consciousness high and happy and in sort of that high joy vibration, then I feel less and less disconnected from the up and down roller coaster nature of the world.
Yeah, we don't get like pulled into the drama, which one of our teachers says, stay out of drama. That's like the number one way to raise your consciousness, stay out of the drama. And I think a big part of that is at its, equanimity at its core is, in my meditation practice that I learned years and years ago, which is this too shall pass, which is exactly what you're saying. The wheel is constantly moving and things come in and things go out. And that's the one thing that we can really trust, right? Is that it's going to change. And so when things are really chaotic, like it feels right now, um, at its core, it's this ability to stay grounded, have those deep roots that don't like sway wildly at every gust of wind. And maybe we do sway and we do feel our feelings, which is really important because we're not talking about like ignoring or pushing away our feelings. It's not about forcing positivity or pretending everything is fine. Equanimity is more about letting ourselves really feel and letting ourselves process what's going on inside without losing our center. And so, finding that way to stay present without letting ourselves get completely swept away with what's going on, maybe not even in our own lives, but just in the media, or just in the news. It might not actually even be happening to us.
It
And so
isn't
it's
in a
when
way.
we, yeah, when we stay present and we look around, we're like, it's a beautiful day and it's quite peaceful where I am. And that's the only reality that I can be aware of that I know, because I'm not actually experiencing anything else.
Right. And it's sort of like that disconnecting from the collective consciousness, from um the mindset of all of humanity. which right now is like, it's terrible, everything's in crisis. And I was just listening to this podcast by Sadhguru. He's pretty cool. He's kind of a modern day guru, and I like his vibe a lot. And he was saying today, like, he's like, unless somebody's pointing a gun, unless there's a bullet flying at you, and there are definitely
Yeah.
places where that's happening, where there's actual hard stuff is going down in the moment. And I'm not saying that's not true, because that is definitely true.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm super fortunate. I live a life where I'm not dealing with that, on the day to day, like many people on the planet are. And I learned like a kind of like a radical mindfulness technique when I was young, and going through like super sort of anxiety. It's pretty bad, postpartum depression and anxiety after my daughter was born. And so I learned this mindfulness practice, which is, in this moment, I'm perfectly safe. And that's what you were just saying, in this moment, like, and for me in my life, and the privilege that I have to live a basically peaceful life, 99.9% of the time, it's true that I'm perfectly safe in this moment.
Yeah.
That's not true for everybody across the world, but I know for myself, if there is an actual emergency going on, I'm pretty good at dealing with it. And that's
Yeah.
true for most of us. Like, that if really something was going down, we would know, like, our fight flight reflex kicks in. We kind of know what to do. And Sadhguru says, what he was saying is that most of the trouble we're experiencing is just this shit we make up in our own mind, because we're anticipating trouble, or we're that anxiety, like, we're, what if something bad happens, but here we are in this moment. It's like you said, it's beautiful. This moment, in this
Yeah.
moment, this moment, now this moment, now this moment. And
What's every
if we do that, um, for me anyway, chance it's pretty good. And because I really like most of the things I'm doing in my life, there's a lot of sweetness. If I'm practicing that radical mindfulness, each moment's pretty sweet.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think I've heard that our physical bodies are hardwired for um, that fight or flight response. We're hardwired for problems. We're hardwired for, what's at the next turn, like danger, right?
Yeah.
And so often this kind of goes back to even just our memories of being alive. We mostly remember mostly the bad things, and we forget about all the good things because of that hardwired, response. And so there's, and that's just plain and simple survival for the human species. And so the mindful or the spiritual way of the spiritual practice becomes not like ignoring that that's a thing, because our bodies are programmed so that we can survive, but it's to acknowledge, okay, there is that fear, there is that whatever, that conflict that just happened, to feel it so we can come back into our higher self, not our um what's it called? Lizard self, right? Not that
The reptilian brain, the
I
back
was
brain.
gonna say alien self. Not correct. Yeah, the reptilian brain, which like is just looking for danger at every moment. And so when we're really deeply present with our emotions and we're actually able to process them without projecting them onto anything around us, right? It could be projecting them onto the news, and so we're actually like taking it in, but we're projecting out something completely different, or onto people around us projecting we all do it, but it's about sitting with all that discomfort, and so that we're not blaming it on the people around us, and we're not like lashing out when maybe there is no reason to lash out. And it's a really important, we're constantly giving our power away if we're in that state of
Like
Like
reactivity, that state of
that
reactivity.
state of reactivity. And so that brings us back to the importance of equanimity, that inner balance.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're outsourcing our feelings onto someone else or onto the scenario of the guy driving who just cut us off. Like I don't want to give my power away. I actually want to like harness and cultivate my own power
Mm.
instead of projecting it out.
I love that. That's so cool. And that, like the lizard brain, the reptile brain's out in fight or flight, freeze, like all that. Then the limbic brain, the emotional brain is in sort of the inner child reactivity of everything. Like, how dare you cut me off in traffic? And, that's the projecty part, like when we're really out unconscious. It's sort of our like level of consciousness of our own inner landscape,
Yeah.
if we're not sort of dealing with our feelings as they're arising, we're not thinking about them, we're not processing our thoughts. That reactivity is just a manifestation of our unconsciousness,
Yeah.
and then we project all that out on the world and we think it's outside of ourselves instead of inside of ourselves.
Yeah.
Then you're right. We don't have any power if it's outside of us. We don't have any agency. We're victims, right? So I think reactivity and victimhood are sort of really, unless we're really in that moment where we are the danger is real. I'm not saying that doesn't happen because clearly it does, but
Totally.
then we're in that state of powerlessness and victim. That's just because it's just some story we've made up in our own head, or that's arising out of the unhealed trauma of our past,
Yeah.
as we went through shit in the past that we haven't fully worked through, we're sort of waiting for the shoe to drop, right? And that we're not in the present moment,
Mm,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, so and I feel it's so important to be able to recognize that. I think that's often the hard part is like,
Mhm.
oh, what am I actually mad about? What am I actually creating drama about? Why didn't I just yell at that person? Or like even it might not be an action, it might just be a feeling inside of like getting like hot and like and so it's really being able to notice that physical sensation in your body and taking responsibility for your inner feelings, your inner world, and meaning like you don't blame you're an external source. You're acknowledging, oh, this is my feeling, this is what I'm experiencing, and in that we're reclaiming our power because it's like it's okay to have feelings. It's okay to be rage filled. It's okay to be mad at the world that's the state of the world right now. It's okay. It's relevant. Um
and and we have a lot of responsibility on what we do with that anger. So
exactly.
if we're processing that anger, if you're like doing an anger workout, or you're writing in your journal, or you're punching the pillow, or you're in the boxing class, that that's different than threatening to kill someone, or joining a terrorist group, or like
Or
there's
like cutting somebody off on purpose,
or have starting a fist fight, like an actual, yelling at your kids or beating your spouse or something. There's like a lot we can do with that, like, where we are responsible for where we put that. And and if we're not mindful and responsible where we put it, we're just adding to the chaos. We're just throwing our own unconsciousness and reactivity onto the into the flaming dumpster fire that's already
Yeah.
going on, right? And that's not helpful.
Yeah. Well, and to add to that, even like all the external anger that can be misplaced, it also can look like addiction. It could look like porn addiction. It could look like, food, like grabbing for food or grabbing for a substance. Like it's, which is obviously a harder one to acknowledge and heal. And it still is that important. It's, if it's really hard to maintain this inner balance, this equanimity, and instead you're reaching for something that's numbing, right? That's still of like
So important, Jane. So numbing isn't the same as equanimity. Let's get that right out on the table.
Yes. It's it's yeah, because you think about so many people use substances, and I don't necessarily mean for medicinal purposes. I mean for avoidance purposes, and like how to know the difference. And so asking yourself, like, can you feel your body when you're having emotions? Can we feel our feelings? I feel like it often, almost always, comes back to the physical body because it's kind of telling us, it's giving us the guide, the blueprint. Um, so I don't know. What do you think?
I
You're
think
so
it's an incredibly important part of the conversation that numbing and equanimity aren't the same. And because we don't always know how to reach equanimity, we go for the numb, you know, and that it might be, I mean, sure, you might be doing substances, but it also might be like playing stupid games on your phone, or,
totally
watching something on Netflix, or, you know, shopping. There's so many different ways that we avoid all the feelings. And a lot of it is because we haven't been taught how. We don't know how to process our feelings in a healthy way. And that stuff is modeled to us from our family. And the chances of your family having healthy ways to do that are pretty slim. That we learn about some bad habits, and there's just all the ways. And for me, like, I know I'm into the numbing addictiony stuff, and let's face it, everyone has it.
in
We all just have our, they can look more spiritual or more subtle. Some of them like don't look so bad, as other ones do, or they're more socially acceptable, but they serve the same function. And I can tell I'm doing that if I feel sort of a hangover effect.
Mhm.
If I'm like, oh, that was a total waste of 5 hours of my life, or an hour of my, like, there, I don't feel good about it, you know,
Yep,
or I'll feel sort of tired, depleted, even if it's games on the phone,
totally.
you know, which arguably isn't hurting anyone. And I'm not saying we should never have fun or do things like, have a beer or watch a dumb movie. Like, there are certain times where we do that because it's fun. That's a different vibe than doing it because you just can't take reality anymore and you have to go bye-byes,
Mhm.
because you can't your reality is not something, or your feelings. It's so funny. I was watching TV, um, and I think I was watching some sort of vintage show on the BBC, and just really noticing that every time anyone had a feeling, they pour a drink. Like, oh my God. It's
Oh
like
my God.
that's I'm having it. I just found out my husband was murdered, and like whatever, of course you would. But I don't know, like, it's such a unconscious move
Yeah.
we have, to light a cigarette or have the drink or do something. We just don't know, how any other way to do that. We don't
Yeah,
know
and it's
effective
always
ways to do it,
always
right?
with oh, go ahead. Sorry.
We just don't know effective ways to handle our own feelings.
That's right. Yeah, and those scenarios always come with, I need to calm my nerves. I might light a cigarette, pour me a drink, I need to calm my nerves.
Yeah. Having an
And
emotion here, here's a drink. Like,
right. Oh my God, have an emotion. We must like suppress it immediately. It's
right.
such an old way of being. It's very current.
Oh my
And
God, listen to country music. And it's all like, I dare anyone to come up with a country music song that does not have the person pouring a drink
fear.
as a
I'm
way to
with
tell thing,
so true. It's
right?
so true.
So it's so embedded in our
Yeah.
being. And I always said, like, the next book I want to write is going to be about calming your nerves, regulating your nervous system, and processing your feelings. And if we could teach people how to do that, everyone knew really beautiful, effective, simple, cheap ways to do those two things, we would eliminate 90% of the problems of the world.
100% agree. Yeah. And so in that way, equanimity, then it's really about just making space for everything we're experiencing. and
Right.
and without letting it like control or consume us, and how we show up for not only ourselves but for everyone around us.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's really not about becoming like passive or detached, which I think there's like this idea, well, if I do this spiritual work, like life's not going to be fun. I've literally heard that.
Oh,
um it's more, it's like, it's about engaging with the world from a place of ease and steadiness. And it's about how we hold ourselves, and being a calming presence for ourselves, but also those around us. And I think that that's super powerful. And people are drawn to that energy because it's it's safe. It's like it's a feeling of safety in ourselves in a totally uncertain world. And from my own experience, that's like the only way to live. And I think it's super fun. It's like where bliss happens and it's experienced, It's where pleasure is like in everything.
yeah, because if your nervous system is not totally jacked up and
Yeah.
your feelings are regulate, you're not in that state of reactivity, then most of the things we're doing are pretty fun, you know? And I find for myself, like the world doesn't, the universe, whatever powers that be, do not stop giving me opportunities to practice equanimity.
So
Like it's like my children, they're adults now, but they still, being a parent has been one of the things that has pushed me on that, like, you know, pushed me off my equanimity over and over again. Travel is another thing, like, you know, or I don't know, like watching the news, there's always things. And I notice now that what used to trigger me years ago doesn't trigger me anymore. But there's a whole all new set of things that trigger me. There's a whole new crop of, and it takes more, but there's still, these still happen on a regular basis. I get daily opportunities to practice
mhm.
regulating my own nervous system, processing my own emotions and coming back into that, detaching from the outcome, detaching from like the wheel, you know,
Mhm.
and pulling myself back into my own sovereignty. I never, I don't think we ever, until maybe we reach like full enlightenment, then it doesn't matter. Then we're in that constant state, but I'm certainly not there yet.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that talking about that trigger point, just for, let's say you've never heard, like done this work ever, which probably if you're listening to this, you have, but if you haven't, like that trigger is like a flashing light. It's your body giving you a physical response on a felt sense to something that's wants to be looked at, that wants like a spotlight to be shown on, and so that you can be like, oh, what is that about, and have curiosity around it. It's not to be like stuff it down further or react to the trigger, be like, well, I'm being triggered, so fuck you. It's like, no, oh, interesting. I'm having this response where I'm feeling triggered, which means like maybe I'm feeling really hot. My head is really hot, or like I'm starting to shake, or whatever your physical response is to that trigger. Because you're gonna have one, you know. Or maybe it's just like that reactive state. Well, okay, maybe you had that reaction, you pull it back, and maybe even there needs to be repair because you
Yep.
just had a trigger that made that, so you reacted in a certain way that you didn't actually mean. The important thing is to repair that and bring it back, bring that energy back. And that's like the reclamation, and also taking responsibility
Yeah.
for yourself and your feelings. It's your
Absolutely.
trigger. It's not
Don't
the
stop
other
getting
person.
triggered, but we are responsible for what we do. And like, I never judge people for getting triggered. I just don't really, like, we all get
Totally.
triggered. It's so what we do after the trigger,
Yeah.
where I'm like, oh, they didn't handle that very well, or, and I find I trust people who clean up afterwards. I don't expect people to be perfect, and I'm not either. I still get triggered. But I trust, let people into my inner circle who can take that ownership and do that repair.
Yeah.
Because that's where I feel safe and comfortable. It's so funny because when you're talking about the physical thing, I'm so much more aware of the emotional side of the trigger. Like I feel the emotional side first.
Hmm.
And then the physical side sometimes gets lost because I kind of go out of my body,
Yeah.
and so I'm feeling like I feel the emotional, I'm hyper aware of the emotional aspect of the trigger, and the physical thing gets lost for me. And that for me, it's usually anxiety, but sometimes anger, but most
Yeah.
of the time, like 90% of the time, it's anxiety. If I'm anxious, it's because I'm triggered. There's one of those trigger things happened.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point because everybody's going to maybe have one or
Yeah.
maybe your mind starts to race or you start to like talk really fast. I don't know. There's all sorts of different responses, right?
Yeah.
Or again, you reach for a drink or you reach for porn. I've just been hearing a lot about this lately, especially because my husband works with men, but it's a massive, massive world epidemic. And so, whatever it is, it's the noticing of it, the awareness of it, the acknowledgement of it. Oh, like, and even if it is anxiety or anger, oh, I'm having anxiety right now. Having the curiosity to even say, well, what is that about? Where is that coming from? Not just being like, I have anxiety, you know?
Yeah, kind of
Yeah.
like that. I don't know the story. I don't know if it's really true. The sort of the younger generations, have this, and I mean, I see it across all generations. Have this like, if you triggered me, it's your fault, you know,
Right.
and you're responsible to not do anything that's going to trigger me. I'm so triggered right now. Like it's like you're like you have to deal with it, and that is just something I would love. I'd love for us to move on from, as from humanity. Can we move on from that? And if you have triggers, it's your responsibility. They are your triggers, and we can't expect the world to bend around our triggers.
Mm.
That's just not going to happen. And no one can clean that up but you. No one is responsible for your trigger. Obviously, if someone's actually abusing you or actually like, that's different. But
Yeah.
if it's your nervous system getting fired off, you can't expect the world to tiptoe around you. And that's not okay.
Yeah. And I think that's why the world looks the way it does, is everybody, the triggers are most often from unresolved trauma from our childhood, if
Yeah.
not past lives.
Yeah.
And so everybody, most of the population, majority of population is like wounded children walking around saying, well, you hurt me, you did this, you did that. And so it's time as part of this awakening of humanity to take responsibility and to heal those little ones.
Yeah.
And in that way, that's when we can really maintain that inner strength and that inner balance and actually like feel our breath. When we're feeling anxious, we can take a deep breath and we can actually calm ourselves down and bring ourselves back to a state of equanimity. And we can truly feel, okay, it came and it went. And it's that simple. And it really is that simple.
Really is that simple. And it can require a lot of work to clean up the unprocessed trauma, to come out of judgment, self-judgment around that. Like, um for me, like I don't feel so much judgment when I get triggered. I feel more curious. I feel a little bit more like, ooh, there's a really juicy one. Like,
Yeah.
there's an opportunity to let go, to heal. And a part of myself, the world is providing that mirroring, that friction around me to give me an opportunity to heal something inside myself. And that I would never see if I wasn't having that mirroring around, you know and I'm like, ooh, that's a good one. And that's a whole different vibe than shame and self-judgment and, kind of hating on ourselves because we have that. And it took a lot of work to get to that place where I felt curiosity instead of shame.
Yeah.
And I think Brene Brown does a really great conversation around that, you know, that empathy and self-compassion are the cure for the the pain that we feel of shame when our vulnerable pieces are showing, right?
Mm-hmm. Because it is very vulnerable. And to trust that we're going to be okay in a state of vulnerability is a hard ask,
Especially if you haven't been. You
especially
know,
because,
if you grew up in a family where you weren't safe, where it
right.
wasn't safe.
Yeah. And so it's like working with the nervous system. And I am safe in this moment. I am safe and I can be vulnerable. And maybe it's just for, a little bit. Maybe it's for 5 minutes. I'm going to be vulnerable about this thing. And then it gets uncomfortable and you feel the uncomfortability, right? It's little by little. And then eventually it gets easier and easier. And it is that trust in the universe, the angels, the masters, the guides, all the beings that are supporting us, the ancestors. Trust that we're going to be okay no matter what. But
Faith.
also,
That's faith.
that's
You know,
faith.
that feeling of we're okay no matter what.
Yeah, that is faith.
Yeah.
Faith in God or whatever you want to call it. Um, and that is a felt sense. It's not just a belief.
No, it is. It's almost more of it's hard to explain what faith really is. I don't know if we have an idea so much of faith as a feeling or an experience of faith as a feeling, a felt
Yeah.
experience. Trusting that everything is going to be okay, that the chaos, the universe is unfolding as it should, even though right now it looks like a train wreck, you know? Um, and I don't know, the deconstruction process is tricky. We don't like that as humans. And it can feel like a train wreck, but faith is sort of taking the step back far enough so that when we're looking at it from the God's eye view, from the cosmic perspective, we see the universe is unfolding as it should. And
And so are we
are we? Yeah.
as individuals, as like individual beings within that the universal, like the weaving of the universe. Each one of us is so important and meaningful, and it's like we're all unfolding and this analogy of, we're always in a state of like a flower. A flower just is. It's not fighting against its flowerness. It blooms, its petals fall, it dies, it comes back, not all of them do, but a lot of them do, right? And there's no fighting against that. And so there's like this allowing of that state of equanimity, of just being the flower and knowing that it's going to change and we're going to go through all these things, and that those are really important and actually by design.
I love that. It's so cool. Such a great analogy. And let's talk about our sort of our panacea for what we feel like, or at least it's mine. I think it is yours too, for how we get to that state of equanimity, and that is meditation. So meditation is probably the single biggest thing we can do to cultivate equanimity. It's sort of baked into the conversation of equanimity, sort of baked into most of the big meditation schools and philosophies. And I feel like meditation for me gives me that opportunity to kind of move through the four bodies that, or, like feel what's going on in my physical body. Like in meditation, I'm like, oh yeah, like I have a physical body. Wait, what's going on? It feels really uncomfortable. And like there's all this stuff going on. And then working through the emotional self, experiencing our emotional self, our mental self, looking at our thoughts and feelings, and then the spiritual self, connecting in with a higher consciousness. And we get to touch on all those parts. We don't have to try. It just naturally happens when we're sitting in meditation, that we get to kind of clean the filters, clear, feel ourselves and clean all that stuff out over time when we meditate. And that for me, that's been the number one. And maybe, we can also say maybe connecting with nature, going for a walk, getting a good night's sleep, really good for your equanimity. But what do you
Yeah.
think? What else?
Yeah, Totally agree on meditation with the caveat that I truly feel that guided meditation is more, I believe it's more in like the
Frontal cortex.
frontal and prefrontal cortex, which keeps our minds active. And so
Yes.
it's not actually doing the same thing or training our brain in the same way as
Sitting.
um, silent sitting meditation does, which uses a different part of the brain, which I can't remember what it's called, but it lights up that part of the brain that actually allows us to feel rested. So it gives us like this feeling of, you do 20 minutes of silent meditation and you feel like you've had an hour nap. And so it's really important to understand the difference. Not that there's anything wrong with guided meditation because it's going to calm your nervous system most likely, but it's a different training of the brain. And then connecting to your breath, right? Being in your body. We don't want to go out of our bodies, which so many of us do in that detachment state or in that avoidance state, so that we don't have to feel the pain and feel the feelings that we're having. So connecting to your breath to bring yourself back into your body. I think those are the two for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I totally agree with you. It's more, I was thinking about the more sort of traditional sitting meditation, you know, transcendental meditation or Vipassana insight meditation, like those concentration meditations. That's where the gold is,
Yeah.
or that helps us work through that cultivates equanimity.
Yeah.
And it's a practice that takes time. It's not like, I mean, you might feel good if you meditate for 20 minutes once, that's going to give you gains, but it's really that practice, I think, sustained over time that really gets you there.
Yeah. Putting pennies in the savings account.
Yeah.
Important. It's more like quarters in the savings account or
Yeah.
dollar.
Dollars. Yeah. And I also think like I am going to put a little pitch in there for a nap because I
Mm.
feel like for me it takes like a lot of energy to maintain my state of consciousness.
Mhm.
And so it's a lot, it's hard. And when I can't do it anymore, I take a nap.
Mhm. Yeah. 10-minute
You
nap.
know, take a
Hour
nap.
nap.
Yep. Take a nap. Go for a walk.
Be out in the sun. Be in
Sun
nature.
in the garden. Just
All
yeah.
the things that seem so simple, but drink 32 ounces of water.
Put some electrolytes in your water.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
All that helps like um I think connecting in with nature helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Important topic.
Yeah, super important. Any last thoughts you wanna share before we end?
Um, I guess the takeaway is just to reiterate, feel your feelings, you know, allow yourself to process without trying to fix or blame or project on somebody else. It's
If
a
you
really,
need help, get help. Like if you need therapy or counseling, and I think the more trauma we've had, the more we need some professional help at some point in our lives. We have to kind of go through
yeah,
unpack those boxes, and it's really, really hard to do that on your own. It's,
yeah,
you know, there's going to be a time where we need to work with therapists, healers, pros who can sort of hold space for us to do the heavy lifting on that. And it's so worth doing that.
so worth it.
Yeah,
Good. Yeah, good conversation.
totally love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's so good to be here and like and subscribe and leave comments because we really, really, really want to hear what you think and
Sounds
send to your friends.
totally. Thank you so much.
All right. See you next time.